Hey guys, Lee here with solar eclipse in Aquarius. Hope you've all been well. I now have Wi-Fi. I'm now a human being. I expect to be back on track with writing transits and things like that about Monday. And interestingly, that's the day that Venus will come into vision again in the night sky. And I feel like a little bit like that too. Like all of a sudden I'm going to be above water. You might see some changes in the background. I have a sofa now. That's advancement. But without getting into that, let's talk about the solar eclipse in Aquarius. Once again, I've got the charts and things in front of me, so that's what I'm peeking at as I look downwards. Lots of things to say about the solar eclipse in Aquarius, but the most important is this, and especially for my Aquarius people, if you've got Aquarius sun or moon or rising, very, very, very important for you, this particular eclipse. Reason being is that throughout the cycle of Aquarius and Leo eclipses, and eclipses always happen in opposing signs, and they kind of toggle back and forth. There'll be one in Aquarius, one in Leo, and so on. And the cycle that we're talking about started about February 11th, 2017, will end January 2019. There's 4 total eclipses in Leo. There's 3-ish in Aquarius. There was one at the very beginning in August 2016, but a lot of people didn't count that one because it was such a minimal eclipse. So 4 eclipses in Leo, 3 eclipses in Aquarius. Of those, there's going to be 2 lunar eclipses and 2 solar eclipses in Leo. 2 lunar eclipses in Aquarius, but only 1 solar eclipse. And this is the one singular solar eclipse that will happen in the sign in Aquarius in the entire cycle of Aquarius and Leo eclipses. Hence why it's important. Because solar eclipses are essentially just a supercharged, powerful new moon. You've got like new moon cooking with gas. And this is a portal. It's a great big opening. It's a widening of a space. It's the start of a great big new cycle that has a lot of oomph behind it. That's why, in fact, I know I have a number of good Aquarius friends who are making big shifts and changes, and I think will probably be, consciously or not, moving with this solar eclipse into a very big new cycle in their lives. So this is why this eclipse is particularly important. It's the only solar eclipse in Aquarius that we're going to have. So you need to look at the part of your chart ruled by Aquarius. If you don't know what that means, there are some tools on my website to make that easier for you. But it's, as a sign, we can say basically Aquarius is quite collective, quite humane. If we think about the iconography of its sign, this idea of the water bearer, which is usually either a man or a woman, depicted with a vase of water, and it's kind of the water is flowing out. They're bringing life sustenance to the community. That is one of the most essential, just kind of like foundational points of Aquarius, is this idea of being in relationship with groups of people and wanting to change things for groups of people, wanting to bring something collective or new, or break the status quo so things can be done in a better way. So this is for sure a cycle of change. Aquarius is very involved in change. They're excited by change. It's the thing that kind of gets them up in the morning. They have one of the best set of eyes in the zodiac for seeing what's in the structure now and what needs to go. They don't really have much. It's true that they're not always the most comfy, cozy, cuddly sign. They don't have a lot of patience or empathy for things that are like past their sell-by date. They're just interested in what's good, what's best, what can be changed, what's for the future. They don't really have a lot of connection to sacred cows, the kind of things that most people go, oh, but we've been doing that, that thing that way for such a long time. Aquarius is not interested. So this is a cycle of change. It's a cycle of possible collective change. A great amount of activism and charitable work could come to pass underneath this kind of auspice, this astrological auspice. And I'd say the following. This is going to be hardest for people that have planets or points in their astrological chart at the end of Taurus, Leo, and Scorpio. It's going to be great for people with air signs, so Gemini, Aquarius, and Libra. Again, more to the late degrees of those signs. And it's going to be pretty good for people that have planets in either Aries or Sagittarius in the later degrees, because there are going to be some nice little things happening across these areas of the chart. Interestingly, the lunar eclipse in Leo, which I always, I have that chart in front of me too. And if you haven't watched that video, you might want to go back and check that out. That video, I talked a lot about attachment and the idea of attachment, our ideas of who we are and how we're attached to that, our ideas of who's on our life and how they show up for us, situations, jobs, people. We're attached to many things in life, and they're like little strings or tethers connected to us, either physically, energetically, whatever, that we have this kind of flux, this kind of exchange that's happening. But it was really, I would say, attachment, and I said this in the video, that I was thinking attachment, but in a wider sense. Again, that it could talk about our attachments to our parts of our persona that we really liked, or things that we felt we were really good at that we didn't want to stop doing, or different things like that. This chart instead is specifically about relationship. Committed relationship. It could be business, it could be marriage, it could be long-term romantic entanglements of any kind. But this is about relationship. We could say, again, if we wanted to blow that word open, we could say it's relationship and how we're in relationship to many different kinds of things and people and places and jobs. But I'm inclined to think from this chart that it's really about probably more romantic relationships, could be business partnerships that have to do with finance too, has to do with money. But this is about relationship. And the reason being is that the sun and the moon are, of course, conjunct one another because we're at a new moon, because solar eclipses are just a new moon with the nodes next to them. In this case, it's the south node, which we'll talk about in a second. Sun and moon are right on top of each other. And right next door, there's two other planets. One's an asteroid, one's a planet. Planet Mercury and asteroid Juno. Juno was the goddess of marriage. She's also known as Hera. And one of my favorite stories about goddess Juno, and I'm taking this directly from Demetra George's great book. In fact, I always have it within arm's reach, Asteroid Goddesses by Demetra George. And in it, she kind of overviews Juno. She looks at all four asteroid bodies, but she tells a certain story about Juno that I really always think of when I'm thinking about Juno and what she means. So she was kind of the ideal wife. She was married to Zeus, aka Jupiter. And Jupiter, funny enough, used to be one of the significations in ancient astrology for children and conception. Reason being, he had so many babies by so many people. He sired children in his sleep, practically. And this hurt Juno to no end. She was always being humiliated. She was always being hurt. He was always playing some game. They would get into these cat and mouse games where he would try to transform into a different animal or species or something in order to kind of get around her, because she was a very, very clever woman. Was always on the lookout for him, and he was always shape-shifting and trying to get around so he could still play his games. And one time, she played an awful trick on him. And it kind of backfired. And what he did to punish her for trying to humiliate him, he's the king of Mount Olympus, he's number one, he doesn't want to be put in that kind of situation. What he does is he hangs her upside down from the heavens and weighs down her arms with golden bracelets. Unfortunately, I think that describes a lot of modern relationships. This idea of first the playing back and forth, the cat and mouse, no party being completely clear or transparent with the other. Secondly, that gets into game playing. Yes, of course, acts of manipulation, humiliation, and for quite a lot of people, money stuff, money issues, money manipulations. That's one of the things that I really think about, is that she was always trying her best to play the role of the ideal wife, the ideal partner. And she herself would every now and again like hint at the kind of idea that she was going to go do her own thing. Like, you know, I'm going to be just as wild as you, just wait and see. And she never really acted on it in the same octave level that Jupiter was doing in his own world. And again, she suffered this humiliation, being hung upside down and weighed down with golden bracelets. There's a lot in that. So that's something to think about. Then we have Mercury right next to Sun and Moon. So Juno's already there talking about marriage. She's talking about committed partnerships and the things which happen in committed partnerships. Then we have Mercury. Mercury is the planet of the mind, the rational self, the logic. And it didn't escape me that here we have Sun, Moon, Juno, Mercury. So in essence, we have soul, Sun, Moon, body and emotions. Juno, relationship, marriage, companionship, and Mercury, the mind. So there's something about mind, body, soul, and almost marriage. What is it? What do I want? What's happening? What do I want to be in relationship to? How am I going to be in relationship with things? So here's Mercury in the mix. And what's also interesting about Mercury and where he's at with his own cycle is that a day or a day and a half after this eclipse, Mercury will also stack up on top of the sun. That's known as conjunction. So Mercury will be conjunct the sun. And that's almost like a full moon moment for Mercury. So something has been building in the cycle of Mercury for you since December 12th. That was like a new moon. Now we're at the full moon moment, just moments, days, and hours after the eclipse. And then we'll have another new moon April 1st. So think December 12th to April 1st as an entire cycle of something that's going to happen with communication, with messages, with our mind, with our thoughts, with conversation. And undoubtedly, I think there's going to be a lot of conversation in committed relationships and partnerships. And I think the exciting possibility is to build a new future, to use this Aquarian energy to look at what's happening now, and with those, again, great set of eyes that only Aquarius really has in the same way, in this specific way, to look at what's there, what's working, what's not working, break it down, and build it anew. And there's a sense of what I would call pronoia in this chart. Paranoia, it's the opposite of paranoia. Paranoia being like, I need to be worried because everything is about to go wrong and the world is against me. Pronoia is the sense that the universe and the world is converging upon or trying to usher in something positive for us, and it's working with us. It's like having the wind at your back. And I think that for two reasons. One is that the sun and the moon and Juno and Mercury are all in sextile to Uranus. Uranus is a change maker, a catalyst, a change agent. So there's a sense of this really mild but positive exchange happening between this group of planets and Uranus. I think there can be conversations about change. I think it could be hitting the reset button in a big way on the mind, body, soul level. I think we could be looking at what needs to go, it's like separating wheat from chaff a bit, like what can stay, what needs to go. I think there could be really great conversations about that. Because Uranus is in the mix, there could be some out of the blueness, some things that catch us a little bit off guard, but I think they're for the best. Again, I lean in this chart towards the concept of pronoia, not paranoia. And for some, you'll be saying, oh, that's extra good because Uranus is the ruler of Aquarius. And if you don't know what that means, don't worry about it. But there are certain relationships between planets and signs that are supposed to be integral to the practice of astrology. And the way I work, Saturn, the traditional ancient ruler of Aquarius, is the planet I look to. So even if, there's a great conversation with the modern ruler, Uranus, there's equally as great a conversation with the traditional ruler, Saturn. Saturn is in one of his home signs, Capricorn, and will be for a long time from now, for another couple of years. But he's in great conversation with Venus, who's also in a sign she loves. She's just entered Pisces a few days ago. So Venus and Pisces and Saturn and Capricorn are having this really great exchange. And that looks like long-term love, long-term value, long-term money associations, things that are beneficial, that have legs to stand on, that can go the distance, that kind of thing. So that relationship to me looks really, really good. Where I think this chart gets a little bit sticky is I think there could be elements of overpromise, underdeliver. And there's a part of this chart that wonders if there could be like small levels of deception happening because of some things that are happening with Neptune. But I think there's a sense of generosity here. There could be a sense of too muchness. There could be a sense of going overboard or excessiveness. And that could spill over to somebody really wanting to do the best thing possible and promising that, but not exactly being able to deliver it. Really wanting to, but not exactly being able to do it. Other things I want to flag up in this chart because I know it happens, or it can happen. A couple different things. I'm going to start with Saturn again. So Saturn is the planet of seriousness. He's, time, aging, really attractive processes like that, work ethic, discipline. Oh, it's like my worst nightmare. And he is a planet of stability. He's in good conversation with Venus. So again, that to me says something positive about romance or romantic attachments, female friendships, anything femme or feminine, anything to do with money or values, luxuries, beauty, things of beauty, art. But Saturn is also in a loose conjunction with Black Moon Lilith, true Black Moon Lilith, the wildest of the wild Lilith points. And what that could look like is extinguishing the wild inner nature. Or if that part of us, and it's a wild feminine part of us, it's a feminine aspect of oneself that is about femininity is an emanation, not a reflection. So the reflection works like, this guy I'm seeing or this person I'm seeing likes these things about me. So I change and I shift myself in relationship to that mirror. Society tells me that femininity should look like this or act like this. Great, no problem. Let me just shift around and make myself come into better alignment with you. What true Black Moon Lilith wants more is a wild emanation that kind of rises from the root chakra up. It's not concerned about being pretty or nice or acceptable to other people. And it's something important, especially for women, to tap into and to be in relationship with, because it's an essential part of our nature that's often quashed. It's either quashed by the patriarchy, it's quashed by the well-meaning but subconsciously oppressive people in our lives, and it's most importantly squashed by ourselves, because we look at that and we say, I can't contain that. I don't know about that. I'm afraid of that. And we just put it back in our box. So one thing that could happen here is I wonder if we're going to be a little bit in containment, extinguishing the wild. This may be necessary. I don't know if this is all bad. I feel like this may be necessary because there's a part of the conversation that happens a lot online and in spiritual circles right now about the dark goddess, the wild feminine, this kind of untapped, uncontainable energy, and how we all need to be in relationship with it. We all need to let our inner wild woman out, women who run with the wolves kind of thing. And yet, to be in relationship with people always involves compromise. And I think we could look at stabilizing the inner wild instead of extinguishing it. That's one way. Or bringing some element of discipline to it so that this like wildness has a bit of a backbone provided by Saturn. Other things, again, important for my female listeners and my men too, because you've got women in your life that are important to you. Surely. There's some aspect of this chart that looks like it could talk about denial of one's own femininity. It could talk about the need to be the nurturer, and that trumps our ability to go out and do what we want to do, or like caretaking trumps accomplishment needs. Some kind of exchange could be happening like that. The other big thing that's happening in this chart, and essentially this is a good chart. I'm really going deep here to pick things that I think could end up being stirred by this solar eclipse. Essentially, this is a really good chart. I feel really good about this. That's why I'm using this word pronoia, the idea that like the universe is going to conspire to bring about positive change here. But one of the only itchy aspects is Mars and Vesta, asteroid Vesta, square to Neptune. And what can happen there? Mars and Vesta together, alone, as a component, gives a huge amount of drive. Huge amount of drive, maybe too much. It can be really focused, really ambitious. Like I've set my eyes, I've got my targets locked on something, and I'm going to go for it. And Vesta comes up with all of the focus, the single-mindedness, the tunnel vision to make sure that we don't get off track. Mars and Vesta sometimes can spill over to aggression, because if you've ever been working on a big project or something that it required a lot of stamina over time, you get kind of myopic. You're like, you lose a sense of perspective, and you're living with it like this. And in that kind of mentality, when other ideas come in or somebody produces a bit of criticism, it can be really like, we punch back really quick. So one thing that could be happening is this sense of like a tiny wee bit of aggression, but I think it probably comes out more as a really determined, focused kind of thing. But it squares Neptune, and Neptune is a fog. So it's like Vesta and Mars have gotten on their motorcycle together, and they're ready to drive. They've got the destination and the sat nav already. They've got tank of gas. They're ready to go. And then a fog rolls in that makes it impossible to drive. So one thing that could happen with Mars square to Neptune, we might be driven to the ideal, because Neptune is also the ideal. Sometimes there are deceptions. Sometimes addictions are something that comes up. I often talk about, I call it drunk driving, but that's not an appropriate term. Sometimes Mars with Neptune is a bit like off kilter when he's going. But a better metaphor is the one that I just expressed. This idea that you're driving somewhere, but the fog rolls in and you get a little bit lost. Don't really know how to get home. And one thing that can also happen with this kind of setup is self-sacrifice. That's why I mentioned the other stuff. This idea about Saturn and Black Moon Lilith extinguishing the wild. Ceres square to Pallas, the denial of one's own femininity. Ending up being a caretaker versus being able to achieve or accomplish or to do some of the things you want, and to satisfy that more ego side of us, which is not always bad. It brings a lot of good to our life, a lot of structure and a lot of dynamism. But with Vesta square to Neptune, sometimes we deny ourselves the things we want. We self-sacrifice. We kind of lay ourselves on the altar as the ultimate martyr, ready to just like, take me, instead of, let's say this scenario. Sun, Moon, Juno, and Mercury. There's conversations about relationships. Your soul, your mind, and your body are trying to align or integrate new learnings or new lessons about relationship. Positive ways to do that could be, finding new ways to juggle parenting, finding new ways to juggle the finances, deciding that you're going to have a different way of communicating. You are going to be spending more time apart, but doing creative work. These are all ways that we could look at the very basic structure or format of how we function in a relationship and decide that there needs to be a change in the structure. But just make sure that you're sacrificing a something instead of yourself. That's my only concern about this chart. Sacrifice your time. Sacrifice some of your creative energy. Sacrifice your ability to do all of the things you want to do all of the time. Sacrifice some money even. But just be careful not to sacrifice yourself. That's my sense from this chart. I will leave you guys to think on that. I've probably talked too long, as always. And I will see you soon. Lots of love, best wishes, and most certainly eclipse blessings for this one and only solar eclipse in Aquarius.